Good afternoon, Stucco Fans Football League. Welcome to week one of the 2020 season. The season that we never thought was going to come, but marks our 11th in the journey of our entire league's history. Now, even though that we're in the midst of a global pandemic, we are still going to be able to enjoy some football this fall. So with that being said, let's get right to it in our matchup of the week. Over the last 11 seasons, numerous changes have been made to the league. However, there's always been one constant. Since the inaugural season back in 2010, these two teams have kicked off the season facing off against one another. I've been able to outduel Dustin for the last two seasons, moving my overall week one record against him to 5, 4, and 1. With three of the last six matchups being decided by a single point, it doesn't come as a surprise that the projections are dead even going into this year. For Dustin, his team will live and die by his running back duo of Saquon Barkley and James Conner, who combined for over half of his auction budget during the draft. Ironically, they are pitted against each other in week one, with the Giants playing host to the Steelers. Unfortunately, I don't see this one being a big shootout, so look for both RB1s to have a 14-plus point performance. At receiver, Diggs and Allen might struggle to make connections with their new quarterbacks, considering the off-season being shortened due to COVID. Even both having favorable matchups against the Jets and Bengals respectively, I expect one of these players to be a bust. To round out Dustin's team, Matty Ice faces a tough Seahawks defense, Hunter Henry might benefit from a check-down Tyrod, and Marlon Mack looks to be in the backfield competition with Jonathan Taylor. On the other side of the matchup, my risky draft strategy of boom or bust or RBs is going to be put to the test. Elephant in the room, Fournette and Taylor are both in my starting lineup tentatively and are not the starter for the both respective teams. I need to come out the gate strong with Mahomes and Hill on Thursday night versus the Texans. With these two teams faced off in Arrowhead last year, the pair connected for 2 touchdowns. Otherwise, if I'm going to overcome Dustin, I'll need big games out of Michael Thomas and Juju Smith-Schuster. Overall, I think my big name wide receivers will show up and make the difference in this one. My prediction, Blotus 110. Horning 102, and those Wally bettors out there, I put the line at +5 for myself. The second matchup, we have another notable rivalry game with Ryan taking on Murray in week 1. Murray typically has Ryan's number in the past and has won both matchups last year in 2019. Will this year be any different? Murray's auto draft utilized most of his budget with aggressive bids for McCaffrey, Godwin, Ridley, and Kelsey. Oddly enough, I think this risky draft strategy pays off week 1. CMC benefits from home games versus a mediocre Raider defense, Godwin playing in a shootout game versus New Orleans, and Kelsey plays against a weak Tennessee team that gave up 300 plus yards through the air last year. I do think that Ridley will struggle against Seattle, but Breida and Cohen will surprise the league and put up double-digit fantasy performances, helping Murray be put up over the top. Tannehill isn't a Hall of Fame quarterback, but is starting for Murray. However, he might put up MVP-type numbers in the Mile High City. On the other side of the matchup, Ryan had a different draft strategy, waiting until the 36th pick to draft his first player. Ryan's whole roster is filled with a lot of question marks. Will Watson struggle without Hopkins? Will Mixon thrive with Burrows at the helm? Will Ingram and Thielen be able to stay healthy long enough this season to make a fantasy impact? Will DK Metcalf continue to grow into a wide receiver number 1 in Seattle? We'll get an early look at Watson copes without Hopkins on Thursday, but I don't have much faith in the Texan offense. I do, however, like Mixon and Eckler to put up big week 1 numbers with 15 plus points each when their teams clash against one another. And even though the Steelers were 5th best last year against tight ends, only allowing 7.2 points per game, they did give up 8 touchdowns on the season to tight ends, so watch out for Ingram to sneakily have a good game week 1. DK Metcalf should be able to put big numbers in the Georgia Dome versus the Falcons. However, I think Thielen and McLaurin struggle, hindering Ryan's chances to win. Ultimately, Ryan falls to Murray 98 to 110, with the Wally line being right around 8 points for Murray. In our third matchup, we find Applegate versus Strauss. Another year, another disappointing season for Applegate last year, who managed to finish 3rd in 2019. Strauss struggled as well, but was able to beat Applegate in their opener last year. Strauss will benefit from the Saints' 1-2 punch on his roster of Breeze and Kamara, benefiting practically any time the Saints score. Gordon is a bit of a question mark in Denver, and Hopkins will look to build chemistry early in Arizona. Otherwise, I'm not overly confident in Sutton, Gazeki, or Singletary, so I'm not sure if Strauss will have enough firepower to take the victory in week 1. Applegate clearly doesn't have enough confidence in his Eagles as he drafted 0 players from his favorite team and chose to draft Dak and Shepard from other NFC East opponents instead. Although, both of these players should have decent opening weekends. And I also like Josh Jacobs and Chris Carson to shine in their matchups against 2 defenses who gave up over 100 yards per game last year on the ground. However, I believe A.J. Brown and OBJ will struggle to put up big numbers, limited by 2 strong defensive units. Overall, I think this matchup is on course to be one of the lower scoring affairs of the week, with Applegate putting just enough points to give him the week 1 win. So my prediction for this one is Applegate 90, Strauss 80, with the Wally line right around Applegate at +7. In our 4th matchup, we find Westwood versus Sean Carney. During the draft, many were confused by LJ's tactics, maintaining most of his auction budget until the end of the draft. Sean had a different strategy, locking down Drake early for over 25% of his total budget. Both teams are filled with historically strong fantasy producers, but will 2020 be different for any of these players? Sean has some favorable matchups with Russell Wilson playing in the Dome down in Hotlanta, and Devontae Adams against the Vikings opponent, where he torched them for over 100 yards both times they met last year. Regrettably, the remainder of Sean's matchups aren't as favorable. Hunt and Landry are out of Baltimore, David Johnson's at Kansas City, and Hawkinson is getting the Bears at home, and they're less than ideal for Sean's roster. For LJ, his running backs are risky. Chubb pummeled the Ravens in their first meeting last year, but wasn't able to break 50 yards in the rematch. Gurley is a huge question mark as he suits up for the first time in his new team. Ingram's production might take a dip this year, because it might be impossible to maintain his touchdown rate, and J.K. Dobbins is waiting in the wings. His veteran wide receivers, Jones and Robinson, are also some question marks. Julio Jones had his worst season since 2014 last year, failing to eclipse the 1,400-yard mark for the first time. With Mitch Trubisky being named the Week 1 starter, Allen Robinson looks to have another frustrating season of generating a lot of receptions for minimal yardage. Not much separates these two teams, but I think LJ has the matchup edge in a few positions. Therefore, my prediction is LJ 90, Sean 83, with the Wally line sitting at LJ +3. In our 5th matchup, we have Chad Sr. versus Cameron McConnell. Cam was 1 game away from being crowned champion last year, and finds himself faced against a former champion, Chad Brochill, in the opening weekend. Even though it's a new season, Chad's team seems structurally the same with 2 solid running backs and a wide receiver from Dallas. Zeke and Cook are both set up for big years, even though they both have challenging matchups week 1. However, I do want to mention that I'm not a fan of Carolina's offense led by Teddy Bridgewater, who only has a career average of 173 yards per game, so having both Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore in Chad's starting lineup makes me concerned. Weirdly enough, I think Cam Newton is a top 3 fantasy option week 1 at quarterback facing the Miami Dolphins, so this does give Chad a serious chance of winning this week. On the other side of the matchup, Cam was able to snag 2 high-profile running backs by picking up both Henry and Edwards-Helaire. Both should come running out of the gates with Tennessee's offense dependent on Henry's ability to take over games and Edwards-Helaire benefiting from Andy Reid's playbook. I also like Woods and Mostert to have decent performances in the opening weekend, but there's a lot of room for Cam's improvement to improve. Wentz does have Washington's number going 300-plus yards and 3 TDs in both meetings last year, but I'm not sure that success will carry over to 2020 after coming off a concussion in the playoffs. DJ Chark might be the number 1 wide receiver down in Jacksonville, but the offense is lackluster and will struggle against Indy at home. Overall, I like Chad's chances here and think he takes week 1 by a large margin. Prediction, I have Chad at 114, Cameron McConnell at 95. The Wally line for this one is 10. In our final matchup of week 1, we have Cole Conte facing off against DJ Christic. The reigning champ Toad finds himself matched up against this perennial underdog in his quest to go back-to-back, which is a feat that has never been accomplished in the history of the Stucco Fantasy League. Toad's roster is formidable and has been ranked number 1 by numerous sites after the draft. He is led by his fantasy quarterback, Lamar Jackson. What's odd about Toad's lineup is that he will run a double tight end roster with Ertz and Kittle, but both should go for double digits in the first fantasy week. His team also boasts a strong wide receiver duo with Amari Cooper and Mike Evans, who also should have strong Week 1 performances. Although he does have some questions at the running back position with Le'Veon Bell, looking to rebound after a disappointing 2019 campaign, and Sanders, looking to shake off an early injury to lead the Eagles' backfield. DJ's team, on the other hand, is looking to shed the label of being ass behind the sophomore Kyler Murray, who many believe will have a breakout year. Gibson and Jones aren't in the conversation of elite running backs, but both should produce solid figures during our opening weekend. Galladay scored a touchdown in both games against Chicago, and Lockett should be able to reach pay dirt in Atlanta as well. Kupp is the only blaring concern for me after having a roller coaster 2019 season, but all considered, I don't think DJ has enough firepower to keep up with Toad's roster. The final score, Conte 117, Christic 101, with the wallet line being Conte plus 15. Well, that's all for Week 1. Tune in next week for Week 2 projections and a recap of our Week 1 performance. Until next time, I'll see you later, guys.